I rolled over and slapped the snooze button on my alarm clock, letting out a satisfied groan as I stretched my arms over my head. A massive yawn escaped me. Huh. The moment my phone screen lit up, I nearly tumbled out of bed. Holy crap, it's 7:55. I shot out of bed like a rocket and snatched my pillow, whipping it at the opposite bunk where Pete was still buried. Pete, get your ass up. We're going to be late for class. Pete retracted into his blankets like a startled turtle, only the top of his messy hair visible. Sully, chill out, he mumbled. What's the big deal? We're juniors. Who cares if we're late? It's Professor Lawson's class today, you moron. Crap, why didn't you say so? Pete exploded from the bed, scrambling to get down so fast he nearly tripped over his own comforter. We threw on hoodies and sneakers, fumbling and stumbling until we burst out of the dorm building. It was 7:58. Pete is your stereotypical nerd. His life revolves around video games and anime, and his physical activity is basically zero. After maybe 100 yards, he was already starting to wheeze like a broken-down accordion. Sully, you think we still got a chance of making it? He asked, completely out of breath. I glanced back at him while still running. There's a 20% chance. Why? Only 20%. Pete gasped, bent over with his hands on his knees, his face flushed beet red. Because there's an 80% chance we're going to die. Now hurry up and run. I yelled back. Sully, wait for me. Captain, my captain, don't leave me behind, he wailed dramatically. I slowed my pace slightly. Right, I grunted. I'm not the kind of guy who'd abandon his son. I mean his brother. We finally staggered up to the 3rd floor of the humanities building, panting and heaving. Before we even reached the classroom door, we heard a deafening roar from inside. Sullivan, Kong. On pure instinct, Pete and I snapped to attention, standing ramrod straight as we shouted in unison, Present. Professor Lawson, a.k.a. the witch, was standing in the doorway with her arms crossed. The glare from her eyes glinted off her glasses. Your excuse. My brain went into overdrive, cycling through the list of excuses Lawson hated most. Stomachache. Alarm didn't go off, slipped and fell. Or, my phone was having an existential crisis about its own mortality, so I had to talk it down. I blurted out. The classroom erupted in laughter. Behind me, Pete was so scared he wasn't even breathing. I could literally feel him trembling. The professor's face went from pale to red to a deep shade of purple. Get the hell inside, and that's 5 points off your final grade for both of you. Got it, I said, grabbing Pete's arm and dragging him into the room. As a veteran slacker, losing 5 points from my grade was like a drop in a bucket. It didn't bother me at all. Pete shot me a discreet thumbs up from behind. Honestly, if it wasn't such a pain in the ass to retake a class, I'd probably skip them altogether. By the way, I call him Pete. But because he's a bit well-round, everyone else just calls him Big Pete. There were originally 4 of us in our dorm room, but one guy moved off campus and another basically lives in the library studying for the MCAT. So now it's just me and Pete, 2 peas in a pod, sticking together through thick and thin. The second the bell rang, Pete and I started packing our bags, ready to make a run for the dining hall. Suddenly, Pete started rubbing his hands together with a familiar, groveling smile. I shot him a sideways glance. You want me to grab you food again? Pete chuckled sheepishly. I gotta get back for the new event quest in Genshin Impact. It ends today. I was about to say no, but he immediately played his trump card. You're the best, Sully. My hero. I sighed and clapped him on the shoulder. All right, son. Your old man won't let you starve. Pete let out a whoop and practically skipped back towards the dorms. I just shook my head and turned toward the campus commons. The cherry blossoms on the quad were in full bloom, pink and white petals drifting down in the breeze. It was beautiful, like something out of a painting, and that's when I saw her. A little angel. She was about 5 years old, dressed in a frilly pink tutu dress, with her hair in 2 adorable little pigtails. Her cheeks were chubby, and her eyes were huge and bright, like 2 shiny black grapes. She was twirling under a cherry tree, laughing as the petals landed in her hair. The sight was so cute it practically melted my heart. Whoa, where did this little cherub come from? I couldn't help but stop and stare, completely mesmerized. If I had a daughter this adorable, I swear I'd happily live in a mansion and drive a Maserati. The little girl suddenly turned her head, and her eyes met mine. Her face lit up, and she came running straight for me. "Daddy!" she squealed, throwing her arms around my leg. She looked up at me with her big, bright eyes and said it again in the sweetest, most high-pitched voice. My brain short-circuited. I froze on the spot. I pointed a finger at my own chest. "You, talking to me?" The little girl nodded emphatically, her pigtails bouncing. "You're my daddy." I almost choked on my own spit. Me, Leo Sullivan, single for all 22 years of my life, a guy who's never so much as held a girl's hand. How did I suddenly become a father? "Hey, kiddo, I think you got the wrong guy," I said, crouching down to her level, trying to sound as gentle as possible. "I'm not your dad." The little girl's lower lip began to tremble, and her big eyes instantly welled up with tears. "Wah, Daddy doesn't want me anymore." Her crying immediately drew the attention of students passing by. I heard people whispering, "Look, another deadbeat dad. Won't even acknowledge his own kid. How could anyone abandon a child that cute?" I'd take her home in a heartbeat. I frantically tried to wipe away her tears, my mind screaming, "I can't even handle an 18-year-old's drama, much less a pint-sized tear factory like this. Don't cry, don't cry. Daddy was just joking." Magically, the tears stopped as if on a switch. Crying for another second would have been a waste of energy. She squinted her eyes, wrapped her chubby little arms around my neck, and gave me a triumphant smile. I let out a sigh of relief and patted one of her pigtails. "So, where's your mom?" The little girl tilted her head, a confused look on her face. "Isn't Mommy your wife? Why are you acting like strangers, Daddy? You're supposed to call her Helena." I choked on my spit again. Do kids get this precocious this early nowadays? I stammered, "So, where is Helena?" The little girl pointed a chubby finger towards a white Maserati parked nearby. "Mommy's waiting for us in the car." I followed her finger. The luxury car gleamed in the sunlight, its windows tinted so dark I couldn't see who was inside. But for some reason, I felt a strange, sudden jolt in my chest. "Yara," a clear female voice called from the car. The little girl, now I knew her name was Yara, immediately hopped out of my arms and ran towards the car. "Mommy, I found Daddy." I stood frozen, my legs feeling like they were filled with lead. The car door opened, and a foot in a high-heeled shoe stepped out. Before I could even get a clear look at the person emerging from the Maserati, I was enveloped in a faint, elegant perfume. When I looked up, a pair of long, slender legs in black stiletto heels came into view. A white skirt suit perfectly hugged her incredible curves, and her long black hair was swept up in an elegant bun. A pair of black-framed glasses sat on her high-bridged nose. She looked like she had just stepped out of fashion magazine, an elite professional exuding in natural grace with every step. "Are you Leo Sullivan?" Her voice was cool and businesslike, a tone that made me instinctively stand up straighter. I subtly touched my nose to make sure it wasn't bleeding. "Do I know you?" I racked my brain. There was no way I would have forgotten meeting a woman of this caliber. "Yara, get in the car first." When she bent down to speak to the little girl, her voice instantly softened by about 100 degrees. Yara nodded obediently. "Okay, Mommy. You and Daddy talk now," she said. As soon as she got in the car, I could clearly see her press her little ear against the window. What a little sneak. "You should remember donating sperm at a clinic during your senior year of high school, correct?" Her voice returned to its icy, professional tone. I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. That year, my buddy Will Harris had told me about an easy way to make cash. I never imagined this was what he meant. Even though I eventually gave in to the temptation of the high payout, I never went back, especially after the doctor told me my sample quality was exceptionally high and suggested I come back often. The cringe was just too much to handle. "So, Yara is really my daughter?" My voice trembled a little. She gave a slight nod, her eyes unreadable behind the black-framed glasses. "So you're here today because you want me to take responsibility?" I asked tentatively. "You and I are going to get a marriage license." She said it as if she were discussing the weather. Cough, cough, cough. I nearly choked to death on my own spit. "Isn't this a little sudden?" "It's a contract marriage," she said, pushing her glasses up. "I'll give you $20,000 a month. All you have to do is play the part and take good care of Yara." I looked down, thinking, this woman's attitude was as cold as an iceberg, but Yara was my own flesh and blood. "You can state any other demands you have," she said, glancing at her watch, looking a bit impatient. I can make other demands. My eyes lit up, and the words just fell out of my mouth. So, can I see the legs? Get lost. Her voice instantly dropped to absolute zero. I swear I could see a vein throbbing on her temple. In the back seat of the Maserati, Yara and I started a game. Daddy. Yep. Daddy. Yep. Daddy. Yep. Helena looked like her temples were about to explode. A sharp quiet from her made both of us clamp our mouths shut. She couldn't understand how the two of us could be so in sync with our nonsense. We stared at each other, wide-eyed, before bursting into laughter. Helena didn't get why we had so much to talk about, but she could see her daughter was visibly more cheerful and animated than before. I hope this was the right decision, she thought to herself. The little girl quickly fell asleep in my arms. Watching her sleep, her face an exact copy of my own childhood photos, a strange and wonderful feeling washed over me. Later, I found out that Helena had been determined to raise the child on her own. But 3 days ago, a kid at daycare had called Yara a bastard with no dad, and seeing her daughter in a puddle of tears shattered the strong woman's armor. The car pulled into a gated community of mansions just a few miles from campus. I was about to say I didn't have my ID or birth certificate with me, but then I saw that an official from the county clerk's office was already waiting inside the house. 10 minutes later, staring at the freshly printed marriage certificate in my hand, my mind was completely blank. I'm married? Just like that? To a woman I just met? Yay. I'm going to be the flower girl at Mommy and Daddy's wedding. Yara suddenly bounced up from the sofa, her little hands held high, her eyes shining like stars as she looked back and forth between me and Helena. Looking into her sparkling eyes, I agreed without thinking. Of course you can. Daddy, I want a horsey ride. Yara immediately launched herself at me, hugging my leg. I laughed and crouched down. The little girl immediately scrambled onto my back, so happy her eyes squeezed into tiny slits. Her giggles echoed in my ears. Giddy up, Yara commanded in her sweet little voice, and I had no choice but to carry her around the living room in slow circles. Helena sat on the sofa, flipping through a file, but the corner of her mouth seemed to be turned up in a slight smile. Yara, it's getting late. How about I make you dinner? I asked, glancing at the wall clock. The little passenger on my back immediately leaned over. Daddy, I'll help you. Then I'll have to ask for Yara's expert help washing the vegetables, I said, carefully setting her down. At the mention of helping, Yara started clapping and hopping like a happy little rabbit. Yeah, I'm going to help Daddy. I turned to Helena. Is there anything in the fridge? She didn't even look up from her file. Probably not. We usually eat out. I opened the refrigerator, and sure enough, it was completely empty except for a few lonely eggs and a small bunch of greens in the corner. Luckily, I found some pasta in the pantry. Yara, how about we have pasta for dinner tonight? I asked, crouching to meet her gaze. Okay. Yara said excitedly, pulling me by my shirt toward the kitchen. The kitchen, at least, was fully equipped. It seemed that even though they didn't use it, it had all the high-end appliances. I filled a basin with water and set it on a low stool, showing Yara step-by-step how to wash the greens. I got it, Daddy. Yara nodded confidently. Of course, I knew she didn't really get it, but it was always good for a kid to be willing to get her hands dirty. As I started boiling the water, I saw out of the corner of my eye that Yara was already just playing in the water, her little hands splashing everywhere. Is Yara being a good girl? I asked deliberately. The little one immediately held up her water-splattered hands. Yara is the bestest girl. After saying that, she actually started washing the vegetables for real. By the time I was draining the pasta, the kitchen was filled with a wonderful aroma. I also made a simple soup with the greens and eggs, keeping it light for a child's palate. Dinner's ready, I announced, carrying the bowls out of the kitchen. Helena finally put down her file, raising an eyebrow at the pasta on the table. I served her a bowl. She took an elegant bite, a flicker of surprise in her eyes, before giving her deadpan review. It's edible. Daddy is the best. This is so yummy. Yara slurped her pasta loudly, then delivered the finishing blow. Mommy's not being a good girl. Helena's expression froze solid. I couldn't help but let out a laugh, which was immediately silenced by a death glare from her. After dinner, I was about to clear the table when Helena suddenly stood up. I'll do the dishes. I looked at her, surprised. My stare seemed to have provoked her. I'm not some helpless princess, she said, then took the plates and walked into the kitchen. I was watching SpongeBob SquarePants with Yara in the living room, imitating Patrick's voice. The inner machinations of my mind are an enigma, which made Yara giggle uncontrollably. Suddenly, a loud crash came from the kitchen. Yara and I whipped our heads around at the same time. A cold draft seemed to be seeping out from under the kitchen door. I quickly put Yara down and grabbed a broom, rushing in. The scene before me was both comical and alarming. Helena was crouching on the floor, trying to pick up sharp pieces of a broken plate with her bare hands. Blood was already seeping from her fingertips. "Don't move," I said urgently, grabbing her wrist and pulling a Band-Aid from my pocket. Anyone who plays basketball knows that keeping a few Band-Aids on you is standard procedure. Helena instinctively tried to pull her hand away, but froze the moment she touched me. A look of disbelief flashed across her face. Normally, any physical contact with a man would make her feel uncontrollably nauseous, but now she felt nothing of the sort. "There. Next time, don't pick up broken glass with your hands." I finished applying the Band-Aid and looked up to meet her complicated gaze. "What's wrong?" Helena quickly looked away. "Nothing," but the tips of her ears had quietly turned red. I didn't bother to press her further and turned to pick Yara up, setting her on my lap. The moment the little girl settled into my arms, she launched into a full-blown interrogation. "Daddy, why can SpongeBob and Patrick talk?" "Because they ate special talking Krabby Patties." "Daddy, why does Plankton want the secret formula?" "So he can make money." I was surprised at how patiently I could answer these wild questions. Usually, when my roommate asked me about homework, I could shut him down in 3 sentences flat. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Helena standing nearby, watching us with a complex expression. A mix of confusion, hesitation, and a flicker of some unreadable longing crossed her face. Finally, she shot me a suspicious glare, as if she thought I'd drugged her dinner. Ahem. I pretended not to notice her strange behavior and continued watching cartoons with Yara. But then, Helena suddenly sat down next to me. I instinctively scooted over. In response, she followed me like a cat drawn to tuna, moving a bit too quickly and accidentally tumbling right into my lap. I froze. Her body was so soft and smelled amazing. "Mommy, you're squishing me," Yara complained, pushing Helena. Helena shot up as if she'd been electrocuted, her cheeks bright red. I just wanted to get a closer look at Yara. "Why are you moving away?" My mouth opened, but then I remembered that golden rule from the internet. Never argue with a woman. I could only complain silently in my head. "Lady, if you want to hold your daughter, just say so." "I want daddy, not mommy," Yara declared, wrapping her arms tightly around my neck. Helena looked like she'd been struck by lightning. The mother who had raised her daughter single-handedly, was now losing out to a guy she'd just met? All right, I said, try to smooth things over as I gently patted Yara's pigtails. "Just let daddy hold you." Helena gave a stiff nod, pretending to fix her hair to hide her disappointment. The moment had been incredibly awkward for her, accidentally falling into my lap like that. "Yara, it's time for your bath in bed," Helena said, checking her watch. "I want daddy to give me my bath." Yara immediately turned her big, sparkling eyes on me, a look that nearly made me surrender on the spot. "Absolutely not." Helena refused flatly. "But why? Yara's little lip jutted out. "Because Yara is a big girl now," Helena said, her face stern. "And if you don't listen, I'll send daddy away." That did it. Yara's eyes instantly filled with tears. "Don't send daddy away. Yara promises to be good." Seeing the little one trying so hard to hold back her tears broke my heart. I pulled her into a tight hug and comforted her softly. Helena clearly felt bad too, because her tone softened. "Okay, if Yara is a good girl and takes her bath, you can play with daddy for a little while after." Only then did Yara reluctantly follow Helena upstairs, looking back every 3 steps. Each time, I had to promise her daddy won't leave before she would take another step with her little legs. Halfway up the stairs, Helena stopped and tossed down a set of pajamas. "These are my dad's. They've never been worn." I took a quick shower in the downstairs bathroom and changed into the slightly too large pajamas. After drying my hair, I saw they still hadn't come down, so I sat on the couch and scrolled through my phone. Before long, I heard the pitter-patter of little feet on the stairs. Yara came running down, wearing a pink bunny pajamas set, her hair still dripping wet. "Daddy, blow-dry my hair," she demanded, diving into my arms. Yara closed her eyes in comfort, purring like a kitten being petted. Through the strands of her hair, I caught a glimpse of Helena standing on the landing, watching us with a gentle expression. But the moment I looked up, her face went back to being stern. This woman and her inability to be honest, I thought, was actually kind of cute. I knelt on a small stool, holding the hairdryer and carefully drying Yara's long, damp hair. She sat obediently on a chair, her little feet swinging back and forth, giggling every now and then. While I worked, gently untangling the knots in her hair, I casually glanced at Helena, who was standing at the bathroom door, looking hesitant. "Do you want me to dry your hair too?" The words were out before I could stop them, and my heart started beating a little faster. I expected her to refuse without a second thought. Our relationship was still new and awkward, but she bit her lip and remained silent for a moment. I couldn't see her expression, but I could feel the intense internal battle she was having. What I didn't know was that she had just consulted her private physician. The doctor told her that her current symptoms were consistent with skin hunger. This transformation was so bizarre. A single touch from me had flipped her from having an aversion to men to this. Anyone would find it unbelievable, let alone her. She must have been filled with a silent, confusing frustration. Finally, she pressed her lips into a thin line, silently picked up a stool, and sat down in front of me. I stared at her, completely stunned. I never thought she'd agree. She turned her head, gave me a look, and said in a challenging tone, "Well, you said you'd dry my hair." Yara's cheerful voice chimed in right on cue. "Daddy, hurry up and help Mommy." That snapped me out of it. I composed myself, lowered the heat on the hairdryer, and slowly brought it toward her hair. The warm air wafted through her dark locks, and a faint, sweet scent filled the air. It was a fresh, delicate fragrance like jasmine mixed with cherry blossoms, and it made me hold my breath. I had to admit, she smelled incredible, even her hair. Meanwhile, Helena was going crazy inside. "Touch me, you coward," she screamed in her head. "I'm giving you the perfect opportunity, and you're not even putting an arm around me." With that thought, she deliberately shifted her weight, slowly scooting backward on the stool. But she misjudged the movement and lost her balance, tipping straight back. My heart leaped, and I reached out to catch her purely on instinct. She fell right into my arms, her soft body sending my pulse into overdrive. Her face flushed a deep crimson, but strangely, she didn't get up right away. She just lay there in my arms, a contented look on her face. I could feel the heat radiating from her skin and the quickening of her breath. I was about to help her up when she accidentally lost her balance again, and this time, she threw her arms around my neck. The scent of her perfume was even stronger now, and I could feel the soft press of her chest against mine. The sensation was almost too much for a guy with my limited experience to handle. I felt like my blood was boiling. Helena, of course, was no innocent girl. She noticed the change in me immediately. Her face grew even redder, and she buried her head in the crook of my neck, her voice a barely audible whisper. "This plot twist is just too ridiculous." Just as the atmosphere reached peak romantic tension, Yara's happy voice broke the spell. Seeing us hugging, she came trotting over, arms outstretched, shouting, "Mommy, Daddy, I want a hug too. I want to be in the middle." My first instinct was to say no. The situation was just too awkward. But before I could speak, Helena nodded and shifted slightly to make room, pulling Yara up into the hug. As soon as she was in, Yara snuggled into my chest, her little hands clinging to my neck, her face beaming with pure happiness. The three of us stayed like that for a while. I looked down at Yara. "Happy now," I murmured. She was already getting sleepy, her little head starting to nod. Helena looked at Yara with pure tenderness in her eyes, but I could tell she wanted to stay in my arms a little longer. Still, seeing her daughter about to fall asleep, she finally nodded. "Maybe I'll put Yara to bed and come back down," she thought, then immediately scolded herself. "Helena, have some self-respect. You don't want him to think you're easy." She reluctantly prepared to carry Yara upstairs to bed, but just then, Yara, who had seemed half asleep, blinked her big, beautiful eyes open, looked straight at her mother, and said clearly, "Mommy, I want to sleep with Mommy and Daddy." Helena froze for a second, then a flicker of delight crossed her face. She looked at me expectantly, her eyes practically screaming. This was Yara's idea, not mine. Her look left me completely baffled. Her behavior today was just so different. I mean, I was considered one of the better-looking guys in my year, but I wasn't conceited enough to think I could charm her this completely in one day. With her looks and status, she must have had guys way more handsome than me chasing after her. So why the sudden interest? Seeing my hesitation, her face fell, and her tone turned sharp and mocking. Are you a man or not? Scared of your own shadow. You can't even grant Yara one little wish. Her words felt like a direct attack on my manhood. My face flushed. Who? Who said I was scared? Seeing that I'd agreed, Yara started clapping her hands happily again. That night, I was on the outside of the bed with Yara in the middle. The little one's excitement wore off quickly, and she was fast asleep in no time. Even in her sleep, her little hand kept restlessly touching my face. Helena watched this with a hint of jealousy. Yara used to always have to touch her face to fall asleep. It seemed I had stolen her spot. But then, seeing how happy Yara had been all day, a smile crept on her face. In the end, no one in the world wanted Yara to be happy more than she did. Some feelings, perhaps, can only be truly understood once you become a parent. As for me, lying next to them, listening to the steady rhythm of their breathing, I couldn't fall asleep. My mind kept replaying the day's events. It all felt like a dream. I don't know how much time passed before I finally drifted off in the dead of night. At 6 a.m, I felt something tightening around me in my sleep. Half conscious, I reached out to touch it. The surface was soft, with an amazing feel to it. I gave it a subconscious squeeze. Helena let out a soft cry, her voice a mix of ice and anger. You squeeze that again, and I'll chop your damn hand off. The shock jolted me fully awake. I realized my hand was somewhere it definitely shouldn't be. I panicked, my face turning beet red, and stammered an explanation. I'm sorry, I didn't know. I looked at my position in the bed and realized I hadn't actually crossed any lines. I remembered falling asleep holding Yara, but where was Yara now? I shot up in bed. My sudden movement woke Helena, and she joined me in the frantic search for Yara. After a moment, we found her. The little rascal had somehow rolled down to the foot of the bed and was curled up in a tiny ball, sleeping soundly. I gently walked over and picked her up. Yara's eyes fluttered open, and seeing me, she mumbled sleepily, "Daddy, hold me." I held her close, gently patting her back. Helena watched us, narrowing her eyes and muttering under her breath. Such a little clinger. Since we were all awake, we decided to just start the day. After we washed up, Yara, glued to my side, held up a hair tie. "Daddy, do my hair." I stared at the little elastic band in her hand, completely at a loss. I'd never done this before. I took the band and fumbled with her hair, trying to gather it all together, but the fine strands kept slipping through my fingers. When I finally managed to get the tie on, it was a lopsided, crooked little spout sticking straight up. Helena couldn't help but laugh at my clumsy efforts. Her smile was so bright and radiant that I found myself staring, momentarily stunned. Seeing me gawking at her, she blushed slightly, though her tone was as cool as ever. Had enough of a look. I snapped out of it, embarrassed, and tried to fix the sad little ponytail on Yara's head to diffuse the awkwardness. Later, the three of us sat at the dining table for breakfast. Helena took a bite of her toast and suddenly asked, "Are you free this afternoon?" I nodded quickly. "Yeah, my junior year schedule is pretty light." She nodded. "Good. Pick Yara up from daycare at 6. We used to have a nanny, but I saw on the security camera that she wasn't treating Yara well, so I fired her and haven't found a replacement. The company is a bit hectic right now, so I'll drop Yara off in the morning, and you can pick her up in the evening." Hearing that I was picking her up, Yara's eyes lit up with excitement. She clapped her hands, her chubby baby cheeks puffing out as she mumbled around a mouthful of pancake. Yeah, I want Daddy to pick me up." I couldn't help but smile at how cute she was. "Where does Yara go to daycare?" I asked. "The Brighton Academy. It's just a mile from your campus," Helena replied. I nodded again. "I'll be there to get her." She hesitated for a moment, then asked, "Do you need a car? There are some in the garage." I shook my head. "I have a ride." She looked at me, puzzled. "You have a car?" I nodded confidently. Seeing my certainty, she didn't press the issue. After breakfast, She drove Yara and me to our respective schools. The moment I walked into the classroom, Pete rushed over like a hurricane, throwing an arm around my shoulders. "Sully, where'd you go yesterday? I almost starved to death in the dorm." My face stiffened. I'd completely forgotten about him in all the chaos with Helena and Yara. I scratched my head, embarrassed. "Sorry, man, I forgot about you." Then, deciding not to hide it, I told him everything that had happened. Pete's eyes went wide. He reached out and touched my forehead. "Sully, did you fry your brain? Are you still dreaming or something?" I slapped his hand away. "Believe it or not," I said, annoyed. Pete muttered to himself, "If you're going to make up an excuse, at least make it a believable one." I didn't bother arguing. I knew he wouldn't believe me right away. Just then, Pete got excited again. "Sully, log on. Let's play some games." I shook my head. "Can't. I've got to earn some money to buy things for my daughter." Pete stared at me like I was a total stranger. "You've really lost it, Sully. Did something happen to you?" I ignored him and sat down at my desk, opening my laptop to start working on a small game. The truth was, I'd already made a few million from selling a couple of indie games in the past. It was enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life, even just off the interest. But things were different now. I had Yara, and I wanted to give her the best life possible. And I wanted to do it for her. And for Helena, the woman who was slowly starting to make my heart flutter. After a morning of coding, I stretched and glanced at the time. It was already 3 in the afternoon. Yara's daycare let out at 4:30. I had to hurry and get my electric scooter ready. This secondhand scooter was originally nothing special, but after I was done with it, the handlebars were covered in light-up toy airplanes. The front basket was stuffed with fluffy rubber ducks, and the entire body was covered in cartoon stickers. I squeezed one of the ducks, and it let out a satisfying squeak. I nodded, pleased. Yara would love this. When I got to the daycare, the kids were just getting out. Yara spotted me from a distance and immediately stood on her tiptoes, waving her little hand frantically. "Daddy, I'm over here." As I walked over, a young teacher stopped me. "You are Yara Vance's father?" I nodded. "That's right. I'm here to pick her up." The teacher eyed me suspiciously. "I've never seen you pick her up before." I made up a quick lie. "My work schedule just changed. I'll be coming more often now." The teacher was clearly still uneasy and pulled out her phone to call Helena and confirm. Only then did she reluctantly nod. "I'm sorry, Mr. Vance. There have been kidnapping scares recently, so we have to be careful." I smiled to show I understood, then knelt and lifted Yara into my arms. She hugged my neck and proudly announced to the kids around her, "See, Yara has a daddy. I'm not a stray kid." My heart clenched, as if it had been pricked by a needle. "Yara," my throat felt tight. I leaned in and kissed her soft cheeks over and over. "Daddy will come pick you up every day from now on, okay?" She giggled, cupping my face with her little hands. "Okay." A few of the other little girls gathered around, chattering their praises. "Yara, your daddy is so handsome. Way more handsome than my daddy. My daddy has a big tummy and no hair." "Mister, can I have a kiss too?" I clear my throat. Next time, next time." I quickly pulled a few of the rubber duck toys and some snacks from my scooter's basket and handed them out, finally making my escape. I put Yara on the scooter. She excitedly touched the little airplanes and squeezed the ducks, clapping with joy at the squeak sound. "Daddy, the scooter is so cute. Do you like it, Yara?" "I love it." However, her love for it soon caused a catastrophe. When the other kids saw this ridiculously decorated scooter, they went ballistic. "I want a rubber ducky scooter too." "Daddy, I want a squeaky duck." "Wah, I want to ride Yara's daddy's scooter." The other parents looked completely exasperated. Some even shot me resentful glares. My 4-wheeled SUV can't compete with your 2 wheels. A few of Yara's friends gathered around, asking with wide, hopeful eyes, "Mister, can I touch the scooter?" I nodded. Of course. For the next 10 minutes, my scooter became a tourist attraction, with kids taking turns sitting on it and touching everything. The parents, meanwhile, were all asking me, "Where did you buy this? Can I get a link for the stickers?" I scratched my head. I modified it myself. Who would have thought that this one act would lead to 80% of the daycare pickup vehicles eventually adopting a rubber duck theme? Some parents were even forced to plaster their luxury cars with duck stickers just to appease their kids. After finally getting away from the daycare, we stopped by the grocery store. "What does Yara want to eat?" I asked. She tilted her head and thought for a moment. Fishy, she said in her sweet, high-pitched voice. All right, Daddy will make you sweet and sour fish. I also bought some ribs, vegetables, and chicken to make sure we had a feast for dinner. When we got home, I sent Helena a text. Dinner's ready. Just come home when you're done. When Helena came back, the click-clack of her heels sounded a bit weary. She pushed open the door and saw Yara and me sitting on the rug, playing a video game. Yara was curled up on my lap, her little hands on the controller, shouting excitedly, Daddy, I need to eat the mushroom. Wow, I got bigger. You're so small now, Daddy. Helena stood in the doorway, an unconscious smile spreading across her face. The day's exhaustion seemed to melt away in an instant. You're back, I said, looking up at her. She nodded, her gaze sweeping over the food on the table, her expression softening. Go wash up. It's time to eat, I said, picking up Yara to take her to the bathroom. At the dinner table, Yara's cheeks were puffed out with food. She mumbled, Daddy's cooking is the bestest. I smiled and gave her a piece of fish, carefully picking out the bones. If you like it, eat more. Helena watched us, a flicker of envy in her eyes. I tentatively placed a piece of fish on her plate too. You want to try some? Her face instantly turned red. She looked down and gave a quiet and started eating silently. Helena, you're hopeless. You're even jealous of your own daughter. She scolded herself internally. After dinner, Yara let out a tiny burp and patted her round tummy. Tummy is full. I looked at Helena. Want to take her for a walk outside? But she shook her head. I should learn how to do the dishes. I can't let you do everything. I was about to protest, but seeing her determined expression, I just nodded. However, once she got into the kitchen, things went south. Helena clumsily rinsed the dishes, splashing water everywhere. Dish soap foam covered half a plate, and she was completely oblivious. I couldn't help but point it out. You're not going to get them clean that way. She seemed dazed for a moment. Then, as if possessed, she said, Well, why don't you stand behind me and wrap your arms around me? You can teach me. I blinked. You need to be taught how to wash a dish. She instantly realized what she'd said. Her ears turned beet red, and she snapped in embarrassment. Fine, don't teach me then. I swallowed hard. I ended up walking over, wrapping my arms around her from behind, and guiding her hands, showing her how to wash the plate properly. Her back was pressed against my chest, and the jasmine scent from her hair filled my senses. I could feel her heartbeat. It was just as fast as mine. Like this. Rinse it first, then use the soap. My voice came out a little hoarse. She just mumbled, not paying any attention to the lesson at all. Instead, she subtly leaned back, rubbing against me. This feels so nice. She sighed contentedly in her head. I sucked in a sharp breath and quickly arched my back, terrified she would notice my body's reaction. But just then, Mommy, Daddy, you're hugging again without me. Yara's little head popped out from around the doorframe, her voice a tiny accusation. We sprang apart instantly. Yara stood on her tiptoes, her arms wide open. Yara wants a hug too. I let out a nervous laugh, quickly washed my hands, and picked her up. Helena looked at Yara and thought to herself, she must be missing her grandparents. Yes, in a couple of days, I'll take her to stay with them for a while. Yara had no idea she was already being plotted against by her own mother, about to be dumped on her grandparents. The clueless little girl was sitting cross-legged on the rug, controller in hand, playing a single-player game and giggling to herself. Helena glanced at her, the corner of her mouth twitching upwards almost imperceptibly, before she turned and went upstairs to take a shower. When she came back down, I nearly choked on my own spit. A black, semi-transparent nightgown, skin peeking through the fabric, long, pale legs on full display. This outfit was a serious test of my self-control. Helena was very pleased with my reaction. A sly glint appeared in her eyes as she deliberately leaned in to hug Yara, her soft body brushing against mine. This woman, is she trying to seduce me? I wondered silently, but kept a straight face. I cleared my throat and picked Yara up. Come on, time for your bath. Helena, is this man made of wood? I'm practically throwing myself at him, and he's still not getting it. After their bath, the three of us ended up in the same bed again, just like the night before. With yesterday's experience, I fell asleep much faster this time. In the middle of the night, I vaguely felt something tickling my abs. Yara, stop messing around. I mumbled, my eyes still closed, and gave a light pat on her little bottom. Smack! That didn't feel right. It was too soft and warm. I shot my eyes open and met Helena's blushing face. She was frozen like a cat caught stealing fish, her hand still resting on my stomach. What are you doing? I asked, my voice husky. Helena turned her head away in embarrassment, refusing to speak, but she didn't pull her hand back. I had to laugh. I put my hand on her thigh and gave it a couple of retaliatory strokes. NGH. She gasped, her body instantly going limp. Just as the atmosphere was heating up, Daddy, yummy, Yara mumbled in her sleep, smacking her lips as she rolled over. We both shot apart like we'd been electrocuted, holding our breath and looking at Yara. We relaxed when we realized she was just talking in her sleep. Helena shot Yara a dirty look, gritting her teeth. This little brat, ruining my plans again. I silently moved Yara back into the middle of the bed. Seeing this, Helena had no choice but to begrudgingly abandon her night raid. The next morning, I made breakfast for Helena. She sat at the table, her ears still red from the memory of last night, looking like a timid little quail. I decided to tease her. Your legs are very nice. Helena's chopsticks paused. She decided to just own it. Your abs aren't bad either. I laughed out loud. I didn't know you were such a little perv. Don't say that, she glared at me, embarrassed. We ate the rest of our breakfast in silence, neither of us bringing up last night again. It was Saturday, so I didn't have class. Helena had to go into the office, and Yara was still sleeping in. Helena quickly slipped back into her powerful CEO persona. Before leaving, she reminded me, don't let Yara play video games all day. Make sure she does her homework. I nodded. Don't worry. As soon as Helena left, Yara came downstairs, rubbing her eyes. Daddy, she mumbled, throwing herself into my arms. I ruffled her hair. Hungry? Daddy will make you breakfast. After we ate, we sat on the living room floor, controllers in hand, completely absorbed in a game. Get that little monster, Yara shouted excitedly. Just as we were at the most intense part, the lock clicked. Helena was back. Yara and I froze. We frantically shut off the game and grabbed her homework, pretending to be hard at work. Helena raised an eyebrow at us. I just came back for file. Yara held her pencil, a look of intense concentration on her face. I played the part of the strict father. You wrote that letter wrong. Erase it and do it again. Helena couldn't help but smile. It's fine, you can play. Yay, Mommy's the best. Yara cheered, immediately diving back for the game controller. Helena grabbed her file and was about to leave when her phone rang. She answered it, and her expression changed drastically. How could this have happened? After hanging up, she rushed towards the door. There's a problem at the office. I have to go now. Before I could even ask what was wrong, she was gone like the wind. Around noon, I was planning to make fish with pickled greens for Yara, but realized I was out of key spice. Daddy's running to the supermarket to get something. I told Yara, you play here by yourself for a little bit. Don't open the door for strangers, okay? Yara nodded obediently. Okay, Daddy. Just as I got to the door, my phone, which I'd forgotten at home, started ringing. Yara thought it was Helena and ran over to answer it. Mommy, she chirped. On the other end, Pete was confused. Is Leo there? Are you asking for Daddy? Yara tilted her head. Pete's eyes went wide. Sully really has a daughter, and she can talk. He lowered his voice, trying to sound as gentle as possible. Hey there, little one. When will your daddy be back? Yara was staring at the game on the screen and replied without thinking. Your dad's not home. Pete! This is definitely Sully's kid. She's got the same smart mouth. He let out a nervous laugh. Okay, well, when your daddy gets back, tell him to call me, all right? Okay, Uncle, Yara said, hanging up and going back to her game. Pete stood there, holding his phone, a picture of a cute, pink-cheeked little girl forming in his mind. He sighed. That guy's Sully. He plays his cards close to the chest. Meanwhile, Helena sat in a private room at a high-end restaurant. Across from her, a portly man, Mr. Jenkins, was barely contained by his expensive suit. His small, beady eyes scanned her up and down like she was a piece of merchandise. Mr. Jenkins, our company is in need of a $5 million loan. I was hoping. Before she could finish, Jenkins cut her off with a greasy smile. Helena, my dear, let's not talk business just yet. Come on, have a drink. He pushed a glass of red wine towards her, his fingers accidentally brushing the back of her hand. The touch sent a wave of nausea through Helena. She almost threw up on the spot. So the aversion to men is still there, she thought. It's just gone when it comes to Leo. She forced down the disgust and took a small sip of wine. Seeing this, Jenkins's smile grew even oilier. He started putting food on her plate, feigning concern. It's not easy for a young woman to run a company all by herself. As he spoke, his hand started creeping towards her thigh. Splash! Helena threw the entire glass of wine in his face. Jenkins exploded with rage, slamming his hands on the table as he stood up. Helena Vance, your company's assets are barely $10 million, and you still owe the bank $1 million on that mansion. Do you have any idea how easy it would be for me to make sure no one in this city ever lends you a dime again? He panted, then lowered his voice to a threatening hiss. Now get on your knees and apologize. Then spend the night with me, and maybe we can still talk about this. Helena gave him a cold, hard stare, grabbed her purse, and walked out. I'd rather go bankrupt than beg from a scumbag like you. Back in the car, her young assistant asked timidly, Ms. Vance, where are we going? Helena rubbed her temples. Back to the office. As soon as she got there, she started calling every bank she had a relationship with. But they all either made excuses about tight credit or just didn't pick up. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the traffic below, her eyes starting to sting. She had built this media company from the ground up, pouring her heart and soul into it. Now, because of this one funding gap, it could all turn to dust. She had managed to scrape together $2 million, but the remaining $4.5 million felt like a mountain crushing her. If she couldn't find the money, not only would the company go under, but the bank would foreclose on her home. Helena clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. Her phone vibrated. The name, Yara's dad, flashed on the screen. She took a deep breath, composed herself, and answered. Hello. Yara wants to know if you're coming home for dinner. My voice came through the phone, warm and calm. Helena's nose tingled. Home. Somehow, just knowing they were there made the impossible seem manageable. I can't make it tonight. Something came up at the office, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then I asked, is something wrong with the company? I have some money. You can use it if you need it. Helena let out a bitter laugh. How much money could a college student possibly have? Still, the gesture touched her deeply. After I insisted several times, she sent me her bank account number. Whatever it is, it's the thought that counts, I said. After hanging up, Helena leaned back in her chair, her eyes welling up. All these years of business partnerships, and none of them are worth as much as a man I've only known for a few days. He's definitely the one for me, she whispered, a small smile gracing her lips. At the same time, I was in the kitchen making pickled fish for Yara when my phone started vibrating like crazy. The second I answered, Pete's roar came blasting through. Holy crap, Sully, where did you abduct this daughter from? Her voice is the cutest thing I've ever heard. When was she born? Who's the mom? You've been holding out on me, man. I held the phone away from my ear. What do you mean, abduct? She's my daughter. Cut the crap. You have to bring her to meet me tomorrow. Fine, fine. We'll all have dinner tomorrow night. I agreed wearily, then quickly hung up. Yara was squatting next to me, curiously poking the fish in the bowl. Daddy, why isn't the fishy moving? Because it's sleeping, I said with a nervous laugh, quickly changing the subject. Is Yara hungry? How about Daddy steams an egg custard for you too? After dinner, I took Yara to the bank on my rubber ducky scooter. She sat in front of me, her mouth open to catch the wind, her little hands constantly squeezing the ducks on the handlebars, their squeaking sounds turning heads wherever we went. Daddy, the ducky says it's hungry, Yara said, looking back at me. I couldn't help but smile. Well, how about we buy it a bigger ducky friend later? Okay. At the bank, I transferred $6 million directly into Helena's account. Seeing my own balance drop to just over $30,000 definitely stung, but when I thought about it being for Yara and her mom, it felt worth it. Gotta speed up the game development, I muttered to myself as I took Yara to the toy store. She immediately spotted a giant rubber duck plushie that was taller than her. She hugged it tightly and refused to let me help carry it. Yara can carry it herself, she insisted, her little face red with effort as she waddled forward like a little squirrel carrying a giant nut. I followed behind her, smiling when my phone vibrated. It was a text from Helena, frowny face. Where did you get this much money? I could feel her shock through the screen. I texted back. It's legally earned. Don't worry, you can use it. 3 seconds later, she called. Leo, Helena's voice was trembling. Just focus on solving the company's problem first. I cut her off. We can talk about everything else when you get home. There was a long silence on the other end, followed by a very quiet, thank you. Back at the office, Helena stared at the $6 million that had suddenly appeared in her account, completely dumbfounded. She checked the numbers several times to make sure she wasn't hallucinating. Her first reaction was disbelief. How could a college student have this much money? But the bank had confirmed the source was legitimate, and her finance department had verified the transfer. The money was real and hers to use. Her assistant asked cautiously, Ms. Vance, is the crisis averted? Helena nodded, her fingers unconsciously stroking her phone screen. Leo, who are you really? She thought about his cheap t-shirts and his secondhand electric scooter. He didn't look like someone who could just pull out nearly $1 million. But that money had just saved her company and her home. Suddenly, Helena had an overwhelming urge to see him, to ask him why he was being so good to her, to hug him. The thought made her ears burn. After resolving everything at the office, she announced, We're leaving early today. She grabbed her bag and headed for the door. Anything else can wait until next week. Her assistant's eyes widened. The workaholic Ms. Vance is leaving early. Helena was already in the elevator, her heart beating wildly. All she wanted was to go home, back to the place where Leo and Yara were waiting. I just put the last dish on the table. Yara was hunched over the coffee table, laboriously doing her homework, her little face scrunched up in concentration. She was clearly not interested in these kid problems. The lock clicked, and Helena walked in, much earlier than usual. What are you doing home so early? Dinner's just... Before I could finish, Helena threw herself into my arms, her shoulders trembling slightly. Thank you, Leo. She choked out. I was stunned for a moment, then gently patted her back. It's okay, it's okay. Don't cry. Seeing this, Yara immediately dropped her pencil and ran over, standing on her tiptoes to blow on Helena's face. Don't cry, Mommy. A little puff will make it all better. Helena laughed through her tears, ruffling Yara's hair. Mommy's fine. Yara is such a good girl. Looking at the big and little figures in front of me, my heart melted. Helena lifted her face, her eyes still red but filled with a contented smile. In that moment, she wasn't the formidable CO anymore, just a wife and mother who could finally let her guard down at home. She was about to speak. Let's eat first, I said, wiping a tear from the corner of her eye. We could talk while we eat. At the dinner table, I gave Helena a piece of sweet and sour pork. Have you ever heard of a game developer called Stellaron? She nodded. That indie dev? We promoted one of his games on our company's YouTube channel a while back. It got a little popular. Suddenly, her eyes widened. Wait, are you saying? I snapped my fingers. Bingo. I'm Stellaron. Wow. Helena's eyes lit up instantly, like a fangirl who'd just met her idol. You made Kitty Corner and Stardust Saga. That's amazing. Yara didn't understand what we were talking about, but she nodded along and clapped her hands. Daddy is the best. Being looked at with such admiration by my wife and daughter gave my ego a huge boost. So why did you stop developing games? Helena asked. I shrugged. I made enough money to live on, and college doesn't cost that much, so I just decided to coast for a while. Helena's mouth twitched. The comparison is infuriating. I work myself to the bone to make a few million, and this guy just stumbles into financial freedom. But then she remembered this man was hers now, and her sense of balance was restored. So, are you planning to get back into it? She asked, her eyes sparkling. Yep, I nodded. The new game will be finished in a few days. We can launch it on your company's platform. Free promotion for you, to drive some traffic. Helena's eyes welled up again. Her voice was as soft as a whisper. Thank you. Honey, HM, what did you say? If you didn't hear it, forget it. You blockhead, she snapped, poking at her rice in frustration. Late that night, Yara was fast asleep, sprawled out like a starfish. Helena quietly snuggled up next to me, her long leg brushing against mine. Thank you. For today, she whispered. My throat felt tight. You're Yara's mother. It was the right thing to do. Is that all it is? She suddenly propped herself up, looking directly into my eyes. Do you not have any feelings for me at all? Moonlight streamed through a gap in the curtains, casting a soft glow on her face. I looked at her trembling eyelashes and couldn't hold back any longer. I cupped the back of her head and kissed her. Helena responded clumsily. We were both breathless when we finally broke apart, a thin strand of saliva still connecting our lips. Today I almost... She shrank back into my arms, her voice filled with lingering fear. I stroked her back gently. It's all over now. Leo, she said, suddenly looking up at me. Do you want me? I gave a wry smile. Would you believe me if I said no? But I want you to want this too, not just because you feel like you owe me. Helena was stunned. Then she playfully punched my chest. You idiot! The line of men who want to sleep with me could fill this entire mansion. And here I am, offering myself to you. And you're turning me down? I tilted her chin up. That's because I'm greedy. I don't just want your body. I want your heart too. She huffed and turned her head away coquettishly. Well, that depends on your performance. I suddenly rolled over, pinning her beneath me, my hand sliding under her nightgown. Performance like this? No, she said, frantically trying to stop my wandering hand, her face as red as a tomato. I'm not ready yet. I placed a soft kiss on her forehead. Sleep. I'll wait for you. The next morning, Yara woke up at the foot of the bed to find me and Helena wrapped in each other's arms. She immediately looked crestfallen. Mommy and Daddy don't want me anymore. We quickly tried to soothe her. Yara, you roll around a lot in your sleep. You must have ended up there all by yourself. Really? Yara looked at us skeptically. Really? We said in unison. We were professionals at fooling children. The Sunday sun was bright and beautiful, so we decided to go to the amusement park. While Helena and Yara were laughing on the carousel, I slipped away to a flower shop. I had planned to buy roses, but was drawn to a bouquet of bird of paradise flowers. Their elegant stems and vibrant orange and blue petals looked like a bird in flight. The flower's meaning was freedom and passionate love. This is perfect for Helena, I thought, buying them without a second thought. I also picked out a small bouquet of pink carnations for Yara. When I presented the flowers, Helena's eyes widened in surprise. How did you know I love bird of paradise? Maybe we're just on the same wavelength. Who's on the same wavelength as you? She said, blushing as she took the flowers, though she couldn't hide the smile on her face. Yara bounced up and down happily. Thank you, Daddy. The flowers are so pretty. That evening, we met Pete for dinner. The moment he saw Yara, his eyes lit up. Sully, you lucky dog. Hey there, sis-in-law. Hi, little one. Come on, let your uncle hold you. Yara tilted her head. Hi, Uncle Fatty. Pete. Like father, like daughter. It was a direct hit to the heart. Throughout the meal, Pete was completely smitten with Yara, hugging her, kissing her, and at one point, accidentally pulling her hair. Bad uncle. Bad, bad, bad. Yara swatted at him with her tiny fists. Pete, however, looked like he was in heaven. Yes, Uncle is bad. When it was time to leave, he was clearly reluctant to let her go. Remember to bring Yara to see me more often. Bye-bye, Uncle Fatty. Yara waved. Pete clutched his chest. Sully, your daughter is dangerously charming. Back home, Yara, exhausted from a full day of fun, fell asleep almost immediately. Helena and I both had work to do, so we didn't go to bed until late. Just as I lay down, Helena suddenly cried out in pain, her face turning pale. What's wrong? I sat up instantly. It's nothing, she stammered. I threw back the covers, ready to carry her to the hospital, but she grabbed my arm. It's that time of the month. It took me a second to understand. Then I bolted out the door. Half an hour later, I returned, out of breath, and tucked a hot water bottle into her arms. Put this on. I'm going to make you some ginger tea. Helena hugged the hot water bottle, her eyes red again. You went out just to buy this. What else? I said, tying on an apron. Just wait. It'll be ready in a minute. From the kitchen, the warm, spicy scent of ginger tea began to fill the air. Through the glass door, I could see Helena watching me, a gentle smile on her face. The soft kitchen light shone on the countertops as I focused on brewing the ginger tea, watching the bubbles rise slowly in the pot. My mind drifted back to my childhood. My older sister used to be tormented by her period her face pale and drawn. I became her designated helper. Under her persuasion, I gradually learned to make this comforting drink. Finally, the tea was ready. I carefully poured it into a mug, blowing on it to cool it down. I brought the mug to Helena. "Try this," I said softly. Helena took the mug and sipped it. Her eyes instantly crinkled in a smile. "This is delicious, way better than the store-bought stuff. How do you know how to make this?" I smiled. "I used to make it for my sister all the time. Learned it under duress." Helena giggled. "Well, I guess I have your sister to thank." "She's your sister now, too," I said with a smirk. Her face flushed bright red. She downed the rest of the tea, shoved the mug back into my hands, and scurried upstairs, her whole posture radiating embarrassment. 5 days later, my new game, Kitty Cat Clicker, was finished. Helena used her company's platform for a full-scale promotional blitz. The game went viral the moment it launched. The cute cat models won over countless women and children, and downloads for Helena's company app skyrocketed, nearly crashing their servers. "Honey, you're amazing," Helena shouted, looking at the back-end data, and threw her arms around me. I narrowed my eyes. "Say that again." Her expression shifted instantly. She pinched the soft flesh at my waist and twisted. "Ow, you're trying to kill me." "Serves you right for pushing your luck," she huffed, though the tips of her ears were red. Yara, watching from the side, covered her mouth and giggled. "Mommy has been laughing so much more lately. Daddy's the best." I picked her up, cuddling her chubby face. "So, does Yara like the new mommy?" "I love her," Yara giggled. "Mommy is like a marshmallow now, all soft and sweet." Helena froze, a sudden warmth spreading through her chest. "So this is what happiness does," she thought. "It really does make you softer." That night, Helena started restlessly rubbing against me again. I'd been holding back for a week. I rolled over and pinned her down. "I believe your period is over, right?" She blinked, a mischievous smile playing on her lips. "And?" I scooped her up and carried her towards a guest room, my voice hoarse. "Is this okay?" The moment she nodded, her face bright red, the last of my self-control shattered. I don't know how much time passed. Helena lay limply in my arms, her pajamas soaked with sweat, her voice raspy. "I'm thirsty." I got up, poured her a glass of warm water, and carefully helped her drink. "How do you have so much energy?" She mumbled, her eyes barely open. I grinned wickedly. I had to make sure this little kitten was well-fed, didn't I? "Jerk." She gave me a weak punch and burrowed under the covers. "You need a shower first," I said, pulling her back, "or you'll catch a cold." "I have no energy," she whined, clinging to my neck like a limpet. "You carry me." I raised an eyebrow. "You're already bold enough to ask me to bathe you. What will you be like in the future?" "Isn't it a little late," she said, her eyes narrowed, "to be asking that question?" By the time I had finished tending to her highness and gotten myself cleaned up, the sun was almost rising. In the morning, Yara woke up to find both her mommy and daddy gone from the bed. She immediately started to cry and began searching the house for us. Hearing her cries, we called out to her. Yara followed the sound of our voices and ran over, throwing herself into my arms. "Mommy, Daddy, why are you in here?" she asked, her voice thick with tears. I laughed and tried to soothe her. "Yara, don't you remember? You walked over here all by yourself. You were sleepwalking." Yara nodded, a look of deep suspicion on her face. She clearly thought we were lying, but she had no evidence, so she had no choice but to accept it. Seeing her cute, self-doubting expression, both of us felt a little guilty. At breakfast, I put down my chopsticks. "Helena, we should talk about the wedding. Have our parents meet." Helena looked down, stirring her oatmeal, her voice as quiet as a mouse. You can decide." I nodded. We then called our respective parents. My parents and sister were ecstatic when they heard the news and immediately demanded I bring Yara over to meet them. Helena was nervous and said she wasn't ready, asking if we could wait until the official parental meeting in 3 days. I understood and agreed. My family lived in the same city, not far away. When I arrived with Yara, I could see my mom craning her neck at the door from down the street. The moment she saw us, she rushed over and snatched Yara right out of my arms. I started to follow her inside, but the door slammed shut with a bang, nearly hitting me in the nose. I could hear my mom yelling from inside, "Go back where you came from. Yara is staying with us today." Her voice then melted into pure sweetness. "Oh, Grandma's precious little darling." "Hi, Grandma." Yara's sweet little voice instantly captivated my parents. That useless son of mine. How did he manage to have such an adorable kid? I could clearly hear my dad exclaim. My sister was waiting impatiently. My turn, my turn." "Hi, Auntie." "Aya, I'm dead. She's too cute." My sister's shriek was followed by Yara's happy giggles. I stood outside the door for 10 minutes. After confirming I had been completely forgotten, I silently got back on my scooter and headed back to Helena's. I knew they adored kids, and Yara would be spoiled rotten there. I couldn't wait to get back and spend some quality time with Helena. When Helena heard Yara was at my parents' place, she nodded, relieved. I swept her into my arms and whispered mischievously, "Haven't you had enough yet?" Helena gave me a gentle push. How could I ever have enough? Before she could say another word, I pounced, and the room was once again filled with her playful protests. 3 days passed in a blur, and the day for our parents to meet arrived. Luckily, both sets of parents were very open-minded. When my future in-laws found out I developed games and had achieved some success, they were even more pleased with me. In the days that followed, as I continued to develop new games, Helena's company grew and prospered. 1 month later, at the city's most luxurious hotel, red lanterns hung high, and joyful music filled the air. I stood in a traditional wedding suit, watching Helena, also in a stunning red dress, walk slowly towards me. Yara, in a miniature matching outfit, skipped ahead of us, tossing flower petals from a small basket, her smile brighter than any flower. "First, bow to heaven and earth." As we bowed, I heard Helena whisper, so softly only I could hear, "Thank you, husband." I secretly squeezed her hand. For the rest of my life, my wife. End of book.